Welcome to the Thought in Crypto podcast, where we talk to leaders in sport and Web3. Really excited for today's episodes. I'm joined by Mythical Games co-founder and CEO John Linden. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Finally getting this done in Paris, not Miami, not any other city. I think this was, well, I was going to say the traffic in Miami is crazy, and like finding a podcast studio there was crazy. But actually, the Paris traffic is...
It's no joke. It's no joke. Yeah, that's for sure. I was a little shocked this morning, but we did it. We're in the same city again for the first time in 6 months, something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we were able to make this work.
Awesome. Well, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about your background and how you got to this point, founding essentially a Web3 gaming business?
Yeah. So I've been... I'm getting old, man. You have to grade it, prove it now these days. Now I've been doing this for a long time. So I started my first company at 19, actually. 1997. I was venture backed at 19 years old. So kind of Web 1.0. Actually, it's almost like Web 0.5 back then. So
when you said 19, I thought you meant 2019. I was like,
no. 19 years old. Yeah. So been doing this for a while. But venture backed, in 1997. So I've been doing it for a while. 3 companies, mostly originally around kind of ad tech and social. So I think we called them online communities back in the day, not social media. But got an early start, had several runs at it, and then honestly had thought about something like an early retirement, and I was going to, not an early retirement, but take a year off. And then I got called from this company called Activision, and I was on the board, like the customer board of AWS at the time. My previous company was a top 10 client of AWS, and so I'd really had a lot of experience from mobile and cloud and all this type of stuff. And Activision was looking for somebody kind of entrepreneurial with my background to run one of the Call of Duty studios. So I was like, okay, that's awesome, and ended my year off after 6 weeks and joined Activision. So many years at Activision, was one of the studio heads there on Call of Duty franchise, mostly shifted over at the end of my career there, to the Skylanders franchise. We were trying to do this kind of new mobile play. I loved it. It was so much fun. Like physical trading cards that became digital assets. Ended up leaving Activision, had a company called Seismic Games. So Seismic was a mobile company predominantly. We had a big game there called Marvel Strike Force. So we got to work with Marvel. We built the Millennium Falcon ride for Disney. If you've ever been to Disneyland or Disney World, the Millennium Falcon ride, we built all that with Epic. We had a Magic the Gathering game, a bunch of different games there, mostly branded IPs. That was our big focus there. And then sold that to Niantic in 2018. And literally had this kind of idea. We were kind of playing around with this concept of Web3 at Seismic slightly. We were just kind of contemplating, like, what do we do next? This whole thing called CryptoKitties had just come out. And we were like, this is really, really fascinating. So when I left and we had to deal with Niantic, I was like, this is what I have to do. And so I think we were a little early, to be super honest, at Mythical.
What was the aha moment when you see CryptoKitties and you're like, whoa?
It was very specific, honestly. So I was never a whale in games, right? I'll spend $30, $40 in a game. I was never that person you hear about that spends thousands of dollars, right? And suddenly, so I it was kind of my routine, and I understood the psychology of players and stuff like that. And then suddenly these things called CryptoKitties came out, and next thing I knew, I dropped $600 on images of 2D cats. And I'm like, what just happened, And I think that was a big moment. That was the aha. It's like, oh my God. The reason I did that is because I didn't feel like it was just entertainment. I felt like this is something I have control as a consumer. I can sell it to somebody else. I could play with it and breed it and try and get something new. I could sell it at a profit. I could sell it at a loss, but it was my decision. And that was the aha moment for me. Now, the other aha moment was like, I sent like, $50 in Ethereum, and you hold your breath for like 3 minutes, hoping it shows up on the other side. So it wasn't super consumer friendly. It's still not fully consumer friendly, but I think that was the other aha moment. It was like, this is amazing. This is super powerful. But it's also super, not ready for consumers. So we got to figure that out. So
specifically to gaming, where did you think that was a big opportunity, and why you ended up starting Mythical?
Yeah, so we have been thinking about, this is not a new problem in gaming. We've been thinking about this as like at the Activisions and Blizzards of the world. We've been thinking about this for a long time. Things like gold farming was huge on World of Warcraft. And we saw this. We saw people selling accounts on eBay. We still see people selling, people still sell free Fortnite accounts on eBay. And why would you do that? Well, you don't do it because you need that account. You do it because there's this skin for DJ Marshmallow that came out in season 2 and I didn't have it. And there's inherent value in digital assets. And so for us, we had seen this challenge, and there's a lot of fraud in that business, in terms of people trying to fraud each other and not delivering the asset. And this is kind of a way to make that all happen. So I think it was, there's some quoting the Twitterverse out there. It is inevitable. I think it was definitely going to come anyway. And I think we wanted to kind of jump in and really help pioneer that.
And you've built some of your own infrastructure to try and help do that. You mentioned the lack of, Dapper Labs did that with Flow, because Ethereum just wasn't built for what they wanted to do at the time in 2018, the crypto kitties, and then went to Top Shot. Why have you folks decided to build your own infrastructure, and what kind of advantages has that given you when you've been building your games? Yeah,
so honestly, when we were first starting out, Crypto Kitties was on Ethereum, mainnet Ethereum, and we're like, this is crazy. These fees, the gas fees were like $60, and that's not what we were trying to build. We weren't trying to build a product for a crypto audience. We were trying to build a crypto product for consumers, if that makes sense. So how do we use this tech and have the average consumer that might spend $20 or $30? It's hard to buy a $20 or $30 item if you have $60 gas fees, right? So we were actually the first company to not go kind of mainnet Ethereum, and instead we were going after proof of stake. We thought proof of stake was the better model. So we went with this company called EOS back in the day. We've changed a few times. We've learned a few times here, but that was our first one. And the reason for that is we just saw, hey, this is the only way to make it economical for consumers. So we kind of went down that path. Block One kind of did their thing, and then we ended up kind of shifting a couple times. So, but that was we were one of the first to kind of shift off of this whole mainnet idea, just because, and then Flow, that was even pre-Flow, right? So we're looking at it from a consumer lens the entire time, and we've been trying to kind of craft that through to make sure it plays well with gamers.
EOS, what a throwback.
Yeah, I actually got a call from Brendan recently, so it's really interesting. So yeah, they're still around. They're kind of doing some new stuff here, but yeah, man, that seems like an eternity, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. It's crazy how time flies. Let's get into NFL Rivals. That's the flagship. That's the flagship game. That's what everyone kind of knows Mythical in the mainstream anyway. About. Why don't you tell our audience who don't know what it is, what exactly NFL Rivals is as a game? Yeah,
so NFL Rivals is an arcade team manager style game, and it's a real game, free to play game on iOS and Google. About 6.5 million installs at this point in the last 18 months. And it's a game where literally there's inspiration, I'd say, from games we used to play a long time ago. The NFL Blitzes of the world, the NBA Jams. We love this arcade style gameplay, but it's a game you actually come in, you're playing, you're kind of have this Twitch gameplay. And on top of that, then you're building kind of your fantasy team. And so you're building all your assets of all these different players you might want to collect and play with, and they're all tradable, right? So we've basically used this Web3 world to make this new economy to where there's an open ecosystem that once I receive it, I can not only play with these assets, but I can actually trade them to other people, or I can sell them on a marketplace, things like that.
And so the on-chain elements, just for everyone to know, are the cards that you can buy, own, and trade. Anything else?
Those are the main ones. So we kind of the player assets are the primary ones. We do have a couple other things out there. A lot of the currencies are soft currencies, virtual currencies, like a normal game. I'd say the other ones, we had this concept and we did it okay. I think you'll see better versions of it in the future. We had this concept of what we call the Rarity League. So the guilds, right? We call them squads in our game, but kind of this whole guild clan structure, the teams are ownable. So you can actually own them, and you're earning currency as the owner, as well as if I'm playing on that squad. So those are actually, sellable assets as well. We started off kind of with that aspect. So those are sellable. The third part we did add, and this was really kind of an evolution of the idea, is that we had some items with a game like an NFL Rivals, and you have millions of people. A key to a game is balance, right? It really key to any mass market game is balancing the economy and balancing the gameplay. And one of the challenges with a scarcity model is it's hard to balance, right? So we had these base cards that weren't tradable, weren't sellable. We could really have as many of them as we need to in the game. We could have 10 million Patrick Mahomes if we needed to in the game, but they weren't tradable or sellable. So we were able to maintain that scarcity. But what we found is that a lot of players are like, man, I put a lot of effort into this base card, and I don't want to start over on a new card, right? So we had this thing called blueprints, and a blueprint was kind of a finite number that people could come and get the blueprint, take the base card, and convert it now into a tradable asset. So that is kind of a third thing you can trade and sell in the game as well.
Up until this point, a lot of blockchain games have really struggled with a couple of things. One, selling stuff and having to make it valuable forever, right? And two has been, how do you make it so someone can't just come in with $1 million and be the best player?
Pay to win.
How have you solved that?
That's a great question. So, I think some of it we've done okay. Some of it I think we're still learning too, to be honest. So there is a little bit of aspect of pay to win, right? And really with any game, if you're willing to spend money, you have a little bit of advantage over someone that's wanting to put their time in as money, right? So there's always a little bit of that, particularly in free to play games. We've tried to curb that as best we can. We've tried to make it more about vanity, more about kind of these concepts of like, oh, cool, I can still get a Patrick Mahomes base and I can kind of play him up. But there are power curves, and that's really with any game, any sports game that we've seen. There is a little of that, right? I'm trying to level that up. Maybe I have a random chance of getting something that I'm starting ahead. It's kind of a similar concept. We tried to make it though to where. And I think we've done okay with it. I think I give ourselves a B plus maybe at this point on that part. That there's a couple things we have to deal with. One is how do you let people kind of come in and trade these items and all that. And then the second one is basically power curve levels. I'm sure we'll talk about in a minute here. Like how do we deal with ongoing power curves in a game that we're not necessarily maybe resetting every year. But I think the key there too is that everybody can participate, right? And that's kind of the cool thing is that everyone can be part of it. And this concept we have called quick trade, to where you're not just necessarily buying and selling, you can actually kind of trade your way from the thimble all the way to the Lamborghini, right? And I think that's the real key, is that it's not just limited to someone that can throw money, right? It's not like you either throw money at it or you don't. Sure, you can be part of that trading economy, but you can also just play the game. And in fact, our rarest items in the game, we don't sell. And they're tradable, they're sellable. We have a tier called the Mythical tier, and a lot of them are limited at 50 or 100, so they're very, very, very rare. They're only available via events. So the only way to get those cards is to either play the event and win, or purchase it from somebody that played the event and won. So I think that's really interesting. And they are the highest priced cards in the marketplace. They're they're the most sought after cards, and we don't sell them, so you have to play the game to earn them or get them from somebody that did.
NFL Rivals as a game has done really well at monetizing as well. Why don't you hit us with some of those top line stats? Because I think there are a lot of people who have built Web3 games, Web3 products that have done really well, but haven't been able to match it with the kind of business model fit.
I mean, a couple of things I think I'd love to kind of point out. So one, I think one of the stats we're actually most proud of, honestly, is when we are building out, we are up against a pretty big, long-term incumbent in the space. I think Madden's been around for 36 years now, something like that. And it's a masterpiece of an IP, right? And we were trying to come into the space with something a little different, right? And this whole concept of Web3. And then, there's this even that there's a lot of tropes out there like, oh, gamers hate NFTs. Sure, I hate a lot of NFTs too. There's a lot of that part of that industry that I don't think hits well with gamers. But we had a lot of people saying, oh my God, you're going to try and come out against Madden. You're going to suddenly have, you're going to get review bombs. Like, this is going to be a terrible experience. And honestly, now after 18 months, I think our game has, they have user ratings in Apple and Google. I think we have maybe 250,000 user ratings at this point. And I think we're sitting at a 4.8 star review.
Pretty solid.
And Madden's sitting at a 4.7. So, and again, they've been around forever, so I'm not slighting them at all. But it was a huge accomplishment to be able to come out with a mass market game that's actually higher rated than even the incumbent by the users. And I think that's something we're proud of. I think other things, we don't reveal all the stats on there, but a lot of it is public with the secondary. I think we're right around $20 million of trade volume now in that game after 18 months, which is great, just on the secondary alone. So assets that the people are earning or buying the game have resold now for about $20 million, something like that. So we're excited on where that goes. And I think that's a great start for that. We've had, like I said, year one and year two are really interesting. I think the other interesting stat that's fascinating is year one, 80% of our revenue came from primary sales. And what we call primary sales is normal game sales, right? Packs of cards, packs of assets, battle passes, things like that in the game. So from Apple and Google, 80% of the revenue, 20% of our revenue came from trading in year one. Year two, 35% of our revenue came from primary, 65% of our revenue came from secondary. So we were able to really effectively shift more and more and more volume into that secondary, in that second year, which is really cool.
I think I'm right in saying you have about 200,000 active holders of NFTs or something.
Probably that's, it seems like, no, I think it's higher than that. I want to say it's probably 500,000 or 600,000. It should be roughly about 10%.
Well, I was going to say even like 3-4% on a freemium model is pretty.
Yeah. Well, you got to remember, someone can earn. You can earn some of them as well. Yeah. So that's the thing. It's not just purchasing, but the other really interesting stat, I'll share this too, is that, yeah, about 3% is pretty good for a game. 5% you're doing pretty solid. I mean, it's all retention and conversion, right? But that's kind of the base there. And I think what's really fascinating is that, we see those numbers on primary. We're in that range, 3-4%, which is great on the primary sales. Secondary then was like this. It was, we track kind of primary conversion and secondary conversion, right? Who's coming into the game monetizing through primary, who's coming in through secondary. And we started seeing this trend of secondary started creeping up. And I want to say it was maybe like March of last year, so kind of right after the Super Bowl last year, suddenly secondary, more people were converting the secondary. And we were still putting out some assets. We didn't put out as many, which is one of the reasons. But we started getting more people converting for the first time. People that weren't spending money in the game were now spending money in the secondary market. And we started seeing that for the first time. It eclipsed the percentage of the primary, and it's never gone back, which is really interesting. So it just continues to climb. So even now in year 2, secondary conversion is higher than primary. And I think what that is a couple things. One is that people are coming in, trying it, right? Oh, I'll buy that little 50-cent item or $1.50 item in that marketplace just to try it out. And then what we've also found is that 50% of people that come in and buy through a secondary purchase first also will now engage in the primary sales. So it's been a huge driver of activity, and it's been a huge way of kind of converting kind of non-paying players into paying players.
I think I saw somewhere, maybe on CryptoSlam, that after Ethereum mainnet, your chain Mythic is now that like has the highest on a separate day, which is pretty crazy.
We're number 2 in terms of sales volume.
Yeah.
I mean, so we're ahead of Solana. We do more daily sales volume than Solana, than Polygon, than Immutable, than any of these other chains. We're number 2 to only.
And a big aspect of that is NFL Rivals, right?
Yeah. NFL Rivals, D-Market. We have a couple different products, and I think it's going to continue to climb. We actually have 4 or 5 games now live, but NFL's a big one for us for sure. The other interesting stat on that too, if you look back at those charts, is they track a couple things. They track sales volume, right? How much is actually exchanging hands per day, and we're number 2 now in the world. If you look at transaction volume, how many actual transactions were moved, and it's just minting and selling and trading, right? We're number 1 by far. I think mainnet does, in a 7-day period, does about 100,000 transactions in 7 days. We did about 650,000 transactions. And in fact, if you take all the other 9 spots to the top 10 and add them all up, we're bigger than all of them combined. So it's good. So, I mean, what that shows to me though, is that gamers are a real audience, right? They don't kind of succumb to this ebb and flow of the crypto world. They don't care. They just come back and they just keep buying. And that's exciting. So,
and you've been able to circumvent the kind of volatility by not having to pay with crypto in game as well, right? Yeah.
So basically, I'd say 90% of our revenue still is coming through, traditional credit cards or in-app purchases from the game. And we have a great process of how we can kind of convert that. So players maybe don't see that from the crypto side. They don't have to be touching the token that's kind of settling all these transactions. They can just kind of come in with real money. They can exit with real money, and they kind of don't touch it completely. Now, what we're finding though is that more and more people are figuring it out. They're like, what's this other thing here? What's this token thing? What's this myth token that I'm sitting on right now that I can convert back to my bank? And we're learning, more and more people are learning what this Web3 concept means and what they can do with it, which is exciting.
Of those crazy numbers that you just mentioned, how big what percentage is that from strictly NFL Rivals?
That's a good question. I honestly don't know. I'd have to go back. From a transaction volume, I mean, it's still, we have a legacy product in there too called D-Market. D-Market is very, very high volume. It's very low margin, if that makes sense for us. So from a transaction volume, it's pretty high. Probably, I bet you it's 90%, 80%, somewhere in that range, from just the transaction volume. And honestly, that business keeps growing too. And I'm happy to talk through some of that too. We're seeing some really interesting things around AI agents that are happening in that business and how people are kind of trading there, which is learnings of how we're bringing it into NFL. But from a revenue perspective, NFL is much, much higher. In fact, it's probably 50-50 at least in our business. Maybe a little higher than that.
D-Market is the third party marketplace that you've built for all your assets, basically.
Yep. Yeah, it's really anybody can trade anything, really.
Got it.
And it's a great test market for us, but it kind of has a life of its own. And in fact, like I said, it's grown. It had mysteriously grown over the last 6 months by like 20-30% a month. And we're like, what is going on? And we found out that there's this whole new world of people now trading digital assets using AI agents. So like things like Claude, ChatGPT, people are now figuring out how to use these models to trade and build their own trading models. And we've seen that effect on DMarket, which is interesting. So it keeps climbing, and we're going to be bringing a lot of that learnings now into, well, why don't we let the players do this? Which is kind of interesting.
And the last question on this, like on the NFL assets themselves, how big a percentage is all the usage, transaction volume, everything driven through the mobile app?
The game itself? Pretty high, actually. It's probably half.
It's pretty good. And especially considering like that shows you your point is validated about how gamers to some extent don't care. They want to play the game and then trade. What we have seen is that it definitely converts a lot of people into trading. And one thing I'd love to kind of highlight is this concept of quick trade we added that's been a huge piece for us. And players definitely get introduced to the concept of trading in the game itself. I think we're the only approved solution now by Apple and Google to be able to do that secondary directly in the game. So we've kind of worked with them on how do we translate it, how do we deal with fraud, how do we deal with all that stuff, and we literally did it kind of almost as a partnership with both Apple and Google. So a lot of people get introduced to that concept in the game itself. What I will say though is most of our power traders end up going to the web or to mobile or something outside of the game, because a lot of them are doing their strategies and hey, I want to put offers on these type of assets, and hey, I think Christian McCaffrey is going to suddenly be big, so I'm going to start figuring out, I'm going to watch that trending, and all that stuff usually happens outside of the game. So our power traders, let's say, are generally trading outside the game, but I'd say most of the players, over half the players, get exposed to it in the game itself. Let's move and switch gears a little bit. I wanted to ask you, a lot of businesses that are building products on chain using sports licenses struggle. It's kind of like we're taking what happened with Panini, Topps, and Fanatics, lifting and shifting it into Web3. You and a few others have done well, obviously. What do you think makes you as Mythical unique, and particularly with NFL Rivals unique in terms of having success here?
Yeah, well, I think we spent an extraordinary amount of money to build a game too. I think that's probably the key difference is that two things. If you look at even the old models like a Dapper model and all that, those are effectively gamified economies, right? Which is great. And again, those are great things to have. But at the end of the day, they're 100% supply and demand. As soon as one gets out of whack, the entire marketplace can fail. And we kind of saw that. I mean, honestly, to Dapper's success, they had like crazy amounts of demand suddenly building up, and these assets just accumulated in price really, really rapidly. And I think it brought an audience into that world of like, ooh, I can profit from this, right? As soon as that slows down or you can't profit anymore, they go away, right? And I think you suddenly have a pretty hard crash on that model as well. What we've done is very different. We are focused not on profiting from assets. It's just a way we've gamified the ability to do kind of trading within a real game. So at the end of the day, people are buying $100 of credits to try and get a Patrick Mahomes or a Travis Kelce or Jalen Hurts or something like that in our game, right? It's not really about, if I spend $100 on Patrick Mahomes right now, maybe he's worth $120 tomorrow. It's not that focus at all. It's purely, I want him in my lineup because it's going to be more fun to play. And so what that does for us, it's lower price points. We don't have million dollar assets in our game, right? Some of them go get into the thousands of dollars, but our average sale is still $20 or $30, right? So it's not their consumer price points, right? And the other thing I think we've done really well is, if you think about, I hear this all the time about, well, why aren't gamers converting into this Web3 world? Well, if you think about how gaming economies have worked over the last 20 years, right? There's been peer-to-peer trading in games for decades, right? And it's always two windows, right? There's two windows. The left window is, here's what I want. And the right window is, here's what I'll give you. It's literally focused around liquidity. It's not spreadsheets and bids and ask and floor prices. They don't care about that. They care about, this is what I want and this is what I'll give you. And so what we've been able to do, and probably the most effective piece of tech that we've been able to build with NFL was this concept of quick trade. And we literally mimicked that. So what happens there, and this has been great for the NFL, it's great for, our new game. It's really a way for people to monetize in a pretty amazing way. So what happens in quick trade is I can go in and say, hey, I really want Patrick Mahomes. And I can buy him. Let's say the market, we don't set the prices, right? The market, open ecosystem, they set the prices. They say, okay, that's $400 US right now. There's still a very small amount of consumers that are going to put $400 on a credit card for Patrick Mahomes. It's just not a behavior you're going to see with the mass market. And there's also not a lot of people that are sitting on $400 of crypto or even have crypto at all that would be willing to spend that on Patrick Mahomes. But there are a lot of people that are playing the hell out of this game and they're earning a bunch of other assets and they could trade for it. So what happens in our game is you can say, when Patrick Mahomes comes up, sure, you can buy it, but now I can hit a thing called quick trade. And if I hit quick trade, he shows up on the left and then all of my digital assets show up on the right. And not only that, but we have an order book, right, in this marketplace. At any given second with NFL, I bet you there's at least 50,000 open orders, funded open orders for player assets. And so literally as that second window pulls up, all of your assets show up and most of them have a real-time bid on them. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've been through the quick trade system, but
I have.
Yeah. And almost everyone has an offer on it.
Yeah.
And it might not be an offer you want, but it has an offer. And I can go through and say, you know what? I'm going to get rid of these 5 players that I don't really want anymore. Mm-hmm. And as I check them, check each one of them, it totals them up and it's adding up what their value is. And a lot of times you can be like, oh, Patrick Mahomes is $400. I just chose 5 items here. They're $400 as well. I can hit quick trade. And what happens is I receive Mahomes. I got rid of my 5 assets. I had a cashless transaction as a player. I got what I wanted and I got rid of things that I didn't want. In reality, what we did behind the scenes is we real-time bought Patrick Mahomes from one seller and we real-time sold all in the exact instance. We real-time sold those 5 to potentially 5 different buyers around the world. Mm-hmm. So we had 6 different parties plus the consumer. We got paid 6 times on a cashless transaction. And that is the power, I think, of Web3 coming into a mass market game. The players are getting what they want. They're being able to trade cashless, and we're matchmaking everybody around the world. And I think effectively what that does from a game developer perspective is it gives you the ability to mix all these cohorts. In gaming, there's whales, they call them minnows now. Some that spend a little bit. There's players that don't spend anything. They just grind assets in the game. You have people that are collecting. You have all these different people around the world. And what that does, that quick trade system mixes all of these cohorts into one transaction. Effectively, we just monetize the non-paying user. And that's powerful. That's super powerful.
Something that's either really, really difficult or impossible to do without Web3 Rails.
You could technically do it without, but I do think as the economy is bigger and bigger, there is a trust and transparency thing, right? So I think with the Web3 Rails are really, really important. And where the Web3 Rails really get important in the future is we definitely see this now. I'm happy to go where we're heading with quick trade. There's some really great stuff we're doing, particularly with FIFA. But we see a lot of advancement happening around this quick trade. But right now we're still quick trading within one game. You could very easily over time start quick trading across gaming ecosystems. And that's even better for everybody because now there's more liquidity and maybe a player is playing a racing game in another ecosystem and they're end up interacting with an NFL asset. NFL is getting paid by a player that's in the racing side. So it's very powerful. It's a very powerful network effect. And that I think you can only do with Web3.
Before we move on to part 2, I'm happy to remind you that this podcast is sponsored by the HBAR Foundation. The most beloved sports fans understand what they want is simple, a reason to be passionate. The HBAR Foundation enables brands and fans to share the passion on-chain using the Hedera network, the most used sustainable enterprise-grade DLT for the decentralized economy. Visit linkedin.com/company/HBAR Foundation to learn more and get the latest HBAR and Hedera network news. This podcast is also supported by Credenza. Credenza harnesses blockchain technology to power real-time data synchronization platforms that transform customer data ecosystems. They make data more relevant and actionable for sports brands, teams, leagues, and IP owners. Find out more at credenza3.com. You mentioned FIFA.
Yep.
Big news that you're going to be partnering with them to launch something called FIFA Rivals, which is sister game to NFL Rivals. this is the first game that they've licensed since their divorce from EA.
Yeah.
So huge use for you guys, huge use for them. Tell us how excited you are about this.
Man, this has been a big one. And we've been, honestly, I don't think we ever thought there was a chance to get FIFA back in the day. We were like that. They were, it was on our list. We actually tried to get into FIFA at one point, made no inroads into it because it's a very interesting organization.
The amount of messages I had, by the way, when that dropped from people at FIFA who were like, now you know what I've been working on. And I've met loads of them and they're great. They're like, I'm friends with a lot of people there and I'm just like, what do you what's that? And they're like, we're talking to people, and then boom, this came out.
Well, what's funny is and honestly, I mean, there's a lot of history I'm happy to share on another time maybe. But NFL wasn't even our first sports game we were talking to. We were talking to a different one, and then NFL jumped in and we just clicked with NFL. So that became our first one. There's another U.S. sports league we've been talking to for a while, and we'd love to talk to again at some point. But our goal was to get to FIFA, right? And I think FIFA, to me, I think the two most fascinating non-U.S. sports for us, right? We're a U.S. company, but the two most fascinating sports I think in the world are soccer, football, right? And cricket. And we actually talked to both. Cricket has a very interesting set of challenges on its own. But I think, if you just look at worldwide attention, worldwide affinity, they're by far the biggest. And so we love what we've built with NFL, and we have an amazing season 3 coming up, but we really wanted to go after this kind of worldwide opportunity. And like I said, we went down the path of trying to get into FIFA. We couldn't quite get in, years ago. And then we actually almost had a deal. We almost did a football game with one of the major leagues. Mm-hmm. And then this whole thing kind of with EA and stuff happened, and then they called us, and we're like, awesome. And we actually met them. I think I met them in Riyadh or something. It was somewhere I didn't expect to meet them, and they happened to be there, and we sat down over lunch, and they said, what would you do if you had our license? And I said, look, and everybody knew about NFL already, which is a really, really nice bonus. So it's great walking into a meeting with FIFA and they already know your game. But I said, look, here's what I think is fascinating. One, I would go after a global mobile footprint. And the reason for that, I try and go to Kenya once a year. It's kind of my getaway from the rest of the world entertainment industry. And what I've noticed is that the last many times I go to Kenya, it seems like every kid I look around, every kid has a mobile phone in their hand and a soccer ball on the ground. I mean, it's on the back of currencies. It's such a global phenomenon. And I'm like, so that was one part of the vision to FIFA is like, hey, what if we did a game that is competitive, head-to-head, 1v1 PvP to start, but globally accessible. Every player, every person that has a phone in the world could pick up and be part of the FIFA world. And they're like, keep talking. And I'm like, okay. So and we kind of shared what we were doing with the tradable economies and how impactful that is. And it just kind of hit. And in fact, we just hit it off right away. And I think we had an alignment on what we want to do, what they wanted to do. They're very, they're very strategic on where they're going with the world of games. And I think it's really fascinating. We're not going to be the only game forever. I think we're the only licensed game right now. There'll be some others in the future. I think they're a couple years out though. Is my guess right now. I don't know the other ones right away or anybody about to launch. But I think they're building a pretty awesome strategy at FIFA, kind of this portfolio structure. And the key difference that I love about FIFA is they're getting everybody to talk. So we're already talking to some of the other people that might be coming out at some point and figuring out how do we work together. And that I have to commend FIFA organization. The fact that they're thinking a long-term strategy, kind of this post-EA world, for them. They're thinking about how do we really engage our player base? And not only that, how do we get everybody to kind of complement each other, kind of stay in your lane to some degree, but also work together. And that's amazing. I haven't seen that in any other sports league out there of, hey, let's get everybody working together. So we're super excited where this is going. Game's coming along very quickly. A lot of cool new stuff we're doing. You kind of mentioned a sister game. It is a sister game in kind of some aspects, but I'd say probably 95% of the game will be different.
Hey, one of the reasons I failed AS level physics was because of a game called New Star Soccer. So if it's anything like that, and actually, like I was speaking to a friend when I was in the States last, and it blew my mind how much money a game like that made on a yearly basis and how small the team is. Yeah. And so it proves that if it can be done right, there's a huge opportunity to engage a global fan base and create a really powerful business.
But to put it in perspective, I mean, the Madden mobile audience a year is about 25 million people. And NFL, we've now gotten about 6.5 million. And we did that in 18 months. We're really excited. We got to about a third of that size in 18 months. So which is a pretty good accomplishment on our side. So 25 million players in Madden a year. The old EA FIFA mobile title did 500 million players. I mean, it's one of the biggest games. In fact,
Crazy.
I think if I have the data right, when EA's FIFA mobile during the last World Cup in 2022, I think it was doing 75 to 85 million players a day. Which is more than Roblox, more than Fortnite.
That's crazy.
It's literally, it was one of the top entertainment properties in the world. And that's a cool opportunity, right? And I think the challenge they had, frankly, on mobile in particular, I mean, speaking a little bit different than the PC console game, but the mobile side is they had a hard time monetizing, right? Because so many players came from South America, from Southeast Asia, from Africa, from India, which is great. You want players playing, but you also want them paying or monetizing. What I love of what we're doing now is this whole concept of quick trade and all that. If we can even monetize a percentage of those players that were previously unmonetized by getting them into the trading ecosystem. We're not asking for money out of them, but getting them using their time as currency, giving them really awesome opportunities to earn in the game, and then get them successfully trading with other players around the world. It's a whole different game, which is cool.
What advantage do you have considering you're built on Web3 Rails and kind of some of the novel things you've built into your product compared to legacy game developers like EA and who have had a history and more, checkered history in sport?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple. I mean, there's advantages and disadvantages, right? So obviously they can outspend us any day of the year, and they also outbrand us, right? I mean, they have some of the best known brands on the planet, right? I think from our perspective, we can be pretty nimble. We can try new stuff. And I think we are trying some new stuff that's really interesting. I think the biggest, and it was a challenge for us on year 2 of NFL, but I think we've learned a lot on how to really address that for kind of year 3. And that challenge was, in our games, we're not resetting the game every year. And that's a really big difference than most sports games, right? We're not in EAFC 23 and then 24, then 25, and you're basically resetting and starting over every year. We're building economies that you can carry and it never goes away.
I really want to dig into that because this is super important, right? And again, this I referenced this in part 1, like the difficulty of balancing that with monetization. There was a Masari research report that came out a couple of years ago, and this is one of the things that I've been sent by a lot of crypto people. Because one of the headlines was EA are leaving X billion dollars on the table by not using NFTs in FIFA Ultimate Team. Yeah. And they were like, check this out. And it was loads of very smart people I know in the crypto industry, not necessarily on the kind of more sports and entertainment side. And I kind of read it and I was like, yeah, this is interesting. And the numbers are interesting, but like they do realize that the reason they make this much money is because they reset the game every year. Yeah. And if they had NFTs, they wouldn't be able to do that. And I ended up writing a piece about that. And a lot of the feedback I got was like, yeah, that's why. Like, and when you build this like that, you can't do what you've done, which is do the forever value side of things. Yeah,
it's very different. I mean, people I don't think put that together. I'm glad you put that together. It's like it is a very different play, right? And that same thing. I mean, honestly, I'm from, like I said, I make Call of Duty for a while. I was one of the studios of Call of Duty, and same thing. I mean, they reset that game every year. That doesn't lend itself to having a flourishing secondary economy. If I come in month 10 to play the game and 2 months later, there's no value, then why would I? There's no concept there. So it is a very different model. So the Call of Duties, the EAs, the Battlefield, all that type of stuff, those are very different games then. But at the same time, there are a lot of games out there, the Riots, right? Think of League of Legends, right? That game's been out for a decade. EVE Online, World of Warcraft. Like, those are the types of games that can work. So what I say is the current sports genre has been more that annual release. We're more that lifetime game. It does also creates challenges, right? Like power inflation is a real thing, right? Like, how do you basically balance between making sure this asset is constantly kind of something I can play with that I've already purchased, and also wanting to give them something new to purchase, right? Well, at some point you got to get them a little bit better, or you got to figure out ways to to use that old asset to do something new, right? And at the same time, then how do you balance that so a new player comes in the game and they're not overwhelmed? Like, what is this? You know? So it is a very fine line on how to do that. And I think we experienced it this year directly with NFL. And I think, we did pull back a little bit this year on marketing the game to make sure we understood that. And we did all right. Like I said, I give ourselves a B-, B+ on effectively kind of balancing that. I think we now have the data on how to do it better in season 3, which is great. So I can't really think of any company in the world that's gone through that, honestly, of how do you balance what's normally an annual release into a lifetime game with a real open economic secondary value on these assets. No, I don't think there's ever been an example of that ever happened. And I think we're the first one, at least in sports. And it's been, really, really fascinating, and of how do you do that in a video game. So we're learning a lot. Like I said, I think we did an okay job with NFL. I think this next year we'll do really well. And obviously we'll take those learnings into every new game we do in the future. So
we just recently saw that Football Manager aren't releasing a game.
I saw that, yeah.
Which is, and again, it shows like, not only is it, you need to make the new game every year to make the margins that you are to make, but the pressure to make that game is really difficult. And so this model makes a lot more sense.
We're excited, and I think it's a different play though, right? So what the traditional annual title releases do is you're trying to basically bring back, maybe grow the audience, but make sure you're bringing back that hardcore audience every year after year after year. Our goal is basically, especially in a free to play, and that's why we love this idea of what we're doing with NFL and FIFA right now, is that we're only monetizing, like even Madden's only monetizing 3 or 4% of their player base, right? FIFA Mobile was only monetizing 2 to 3 or 4% of their mobile plays. There's still another 97% of that audience that aren't monetizing, right? So our view is that let's give them something new. Let's give them a way, if we can effectively monetize via trading, and we can move that from 2 to 3 to 4% to 8, 9, 10%, it's a very different game. It's a very different economic style.
Any other sports games down the pipeline?
Definitely. I will say there's a couple now that are interesting that are actually, so our business at Mythical, we have two sides of it, right? So we have one product, but we have our own games kind of through what we call Mythical Studios. So NFL, Blancos is one of our games there. FIFA, we have a new game with Pudgy Penguins called Pudgy Party. So those are our games. And then we have a thing called Mythical Platform where other studios are building on our tech stack. We haven't announced any of them yet, because I don't think they're ready to be announced yet. But we have signed about 4 or 5 new games there, and I'd say 2 of them are sports games, which are interesting. So different ones that maybe we're not playing in the rival side. I think one of them might end up using some of our tech too, which is cool. So yeah, we love sports. We love the opportunity, and we want to do it right. We're not trying to do 6 of them at once. I think that's also equally dangerous. But we're gonna up the level. I think what we're doing with FIFA is a big step up based on learnings of NFL. Frankly, what's interesting is now season 3 of NFL has a lot of the early learnings of what we're doing in FIFA, right? Yeah. Because FIFA was an ability to say, hey, look, let's take everything. If we were to start over, what would we do differently? And that's what FIFA is becoming now with really awesome new gameplay. We're also now already seeing like, oh, we really like this new stuff. Let's take some of that and now bring it back in NFL. Yeah. So they kind of play off each other nicely.
I recently saw you on another podcast say that you want to bring 100 billion wallets into your ecosystem in the next 18 months, which would, I think there's 500 million wallets globally or something like that. So that would resemble a huge chunk of the global crypto, and that's without taking out bots and people having multiple accounts and so on and so forth. How do you get there?
I think we're already heading there. I don't think we have to. I mean, I don't want to jinx it, but I think we just put out great games we've already signed, and we'll be there. So that number I put out was based on our forecast, pretty conservative forecast. In fact, I think FIFA Rivals alone could outdo that, just that one game. But I think we're sitting on a great pipeline of games with Pudgy, with NFL season 3 coming, with FIFA Rivals, with Blancos coming out. Like we have games like that I think it's just very naturally will drive us there, to be honest. So I don't think we have to do too much. We just have to deliver. Now it's kind of ours not to mess up, right? So no, I think the audiences are there. And I think we've figured out how to onboard players in a big way. We figured out how to get people to start trading in these economies. We have people, that if they want to cash out, that we have all the regulatory side kind of done so they can safely do that and do that in different countries and all that. So I think it's just now we just got to deliver.
On the regulation front, just not something that was in my notes, but that's obviously, I said to someone last night, actually I said on a panel yesterday, people are really under-indexing that the EU has MiCA, the UK has announced crypto asset regulation by 2026.
Yep.
The US is currently going through the legislative process to create like frameworks and regulation that will allow businesses to do crypto business in the US. So that's three major markets that are going to have pretty strong frameworks in the next couple of years. How long is that?
I think it's massive, honestly. I think we've done a great job of being very conservative around that. Like anytime money's in or out, we don't do it ourselves. We work through licensed third parties. It does make us slightly less Web3. You know, we're not necessarily always as cool as some of the other Web3 groups because we are connected to traditional kind of payment systems, and we take that very serious. You know, like our partners have all 50 MTLs in the United States and all the e-banking licenses, and there's countries we'll have to pull out from time to time as regulations change, and we're fine with that. But I think it's getting stronger. I think you're also seeing things like India. India's now kind of redoing their position. I think China's going to be redoing their position on it. It's only going to get better from here, which is great. So I think it's here to stay. And now everybody's kind of realized it's here to stay. And now they're like, how do we really work well for our constituents? And I think that's amazing. So I think, it's only going to get better from there. So
a few quick fire ones to round this out. So when you're speaking to rights holders, what are some of the frustrations you've had when speaking to them? And then how have those conversations evolved over the last 12 months?
Yeah. So rights, do you have any particular rights holders thinking like from a league perspective, from
leagues, teams, brands?
I think honestly, it's been really a pretty amazing especially last two or 3 months for us since we've announced this game on the FIFA side is that we've got a lot of calls, a lot of phone calls, which is great. And I think there's a lot. We've even had formal letters from top clubs. Like they're literally former letters sent to me saying, "Hey, congratulations. We'd love to see what you guys are doing." I think for us, I think a couple things. I think one on the Web3 side, what I do love is most of the clubs and frankly the leagues have Web3 dedicated people. I think they've been pretty hit or miss on some of their projects. Even FIFA, we struggled. FIFA had some things and they were like, we didn't do great on that thing. Let's not tout that. Let's really tout what we're building together, not just, it's Web3, right? Yeah. Because I think it had been hit or miss, for the same reason gaming stuff's been hit or miss, right? And so I think that's been a little bit of a challenge. Like we've had some like, we tried that. Man, you haven't tried this, And I think what we've really laid out, we spent a lot of time to lay out is what this art style looks like and what's the gameplay and why is it different than anything else out there. And really, ultimately, we want it to be a platform, right? Like one of the things we're looking at right now, I'd say, Web3, everybody seems to have Web3. Everybody also has esports aspirations, right? What do we do for esports within our club, within our league, within our federation? And we want this to be a game, and we're building this as a game that can be a basis for esports play, right? And not only that, but we're using the power of Web3 now to have a full tournament system, right? So that people can launch their own tournaments and they can prize it off of whatever they want. So imagine a club could come in and say, look, we want to engage a set of daily tournaments in this game using this framework. Maybe there's entry fees, maybe there's not, maybe it's just free, but the prizing might not even be, cash prizes, right? The prizing could be, a vintage kit that you can only get in this tournament, right? So, things like that I think are amazing. So that's what we're really trying to deliver with FIFA Rivals as well is not just fun gameplay. We have to have the fun gameplay, but it can become the basis of esports for different groups. So it can become the basis of tournament structures or even Web3 strategies, right? Of how they want to deliver Web3 to their audience.
On that, outside of gaming, where do you think the big opportunities are for leagues, teams on the Web3 front and integrating that technology? Yeah,
I think what I do love that everybody seems to have done something. I think the challenge is there's definitely a lot of money because of the affinity and just the love of these clubs and leagues around the world. There's a lot of money thrown at them from a lot of different people. I think a lot of chain and tech companies would throw money to them to be like, just to try and get a leg in, they just needed something and they go to the Real Madrids or the Liverpools or the Man U's or whatever. So I think you see a lot of fractured attempts out there that everybody's kind of going everywhere. which is fine. I mean, that's great. But I think that's probably the bigger challenge is like, okay, cool, we got this and it's on this chain doing this thing. And we're like, we can't really do much with that. I mean, it's like the amount of work to make that interoperable would be very difficult. But I do think what we're seeing, the benefit is they have experimented, which is great. And I think everybody's really thinking through it so really well. I think what we're excited about is we want to give a basis of utility to really engage people, right? And I think that becomes really cool. But I do think, like I said, I think if you start having a game like a FIFA Rivals that we're getting 100 million people playing, it does become a platform, right? So suddenly leagues can come in and run their own stuff and they can have their own Web3 initiatives sitting on top of this game. And that is really exciting.
Or integrated into it.
Exactly. So
fascinating.
I think that becomes really cool. And we're trying to talk to, if there's any leagues and clubs out there, like feel free to reach out to us. We're trying to talk to everybody and really understand what are their goals, right? And I think that's a little bit different. We're not like, here's what we're going to do. We're going to pay you this amount of money or you're going to, pay us or whatever, right? It's literally like, well, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
What's your strategy? What means something to your digital plans or your physical plans, right? How are you engaging your fan base? And could this be part of it?
Yeah. And I think that conversation is going to flip in the next 12 to 18 months in the sense that I think teams, clubs and leagues and brands are going to be kind of pitching chain companies and crypto businesses as much as they're pitching them in the sense that like, it's almost going to be, they're going to see some stuff happen and they're going to be like, wow, why aren't we doing this stuff? Yeah. And the conversations of like, we're going to pay you 20 million a year to then help you do your digital strategy, which is weird in itself, is probably going to end. Yeah. And it's ending as we speak.
Yeah. I think, I mean, it's getting tougher for a lot of these groups. And I think, the challenge with this whole crypto world still is that they have raised a lot of money and they've thrown a lot of money around, but a lot of them aren't very sustainable still. So I think you're going to see a lot of the money that was thrown around maybe dry up over time. And yeah, I think it's going to get into real deals now. So we're just plowing along, building games and kind of we're working to bring real value to these audiences. And I think we do understand that there's a play to become a platform off of that. So yeah, we're welcoming all types of conversations. There's been some really fun ones out there, right? In terms of like, I do love everybody's thinking about it, which is cool.
Last couple from me. What are crypto skeptics, if there's still any left, wrong about?
What are skeptics wrong about? I mean, I do think, again, it's definitely inevitable, right? I think there's real safety now being built in. There's really great products kind of being built in. So I think everybody's heading this way. I mean, I'll tell you, I'll be, again, super honest. Some of the crypto stuff absolutely drives me crazy. This whole world of meme coins, I'm really struggling with some of that personally. I just can't kind of get my head around the value there. I understand what it means. Here's why. I feel it's still a money grab. I feel like, and if you think about it, it's like, oh, I'm going to move here, and I'm trying to get a 1% return here, and then I'm going to try and do this, and it's, And to me, again, that's not really what it's about, right? It's about the ability it's really about digital identity, right? It's like, in listening games, it's like, it's about, this is what I have and this is what I can do with it. But it's about my choice to do that. And hey, this makes up who I am online, right? And I think that's the important part that gets lost a lot in the crypto side. So I think those are things. So the crypto skeptics, I think, are still skeptical for good reasons on some areas, but it is happening. I mean, like, if you're not in it, particularly Bitcoin. Obviously, Bitcoin is setting the standard, and then everybody else will kind of bounce off of that, I think.
I was going to ask you, the last question was going to be, what are they right about? But I suppose like the kind of meme coin mania and that kind of crazy speculative side is what they're right to be concerned.
Yeah, so I mean, I think they definitely are right and wrong on stuff. But I think the meme coin side, again, it's its own thing. I get it. I actually had the craziest thing. One of our partners, they have a token. I won't mention who it is. They have a token, and it's a meme token, and it's done pretty well. And I was like, oh, cool. Now we can add utility to your meme token. And they're like, no, we don't want utility to our meme token. And I'm like, why? They're like, well, as soon as we add utility to our meme token, we're not a meme token anymore. And the valuations, we're playing for different valuations. And that took me a while to be like,
difficult conversation. Yeah.
So you don't want to have any value to the meme token because you think it's worth more. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, all right. And that's just my difference for me. I'm all about let's build real utility for consumers and give them something that's valuable, right? And I think that's our difference. So the skeptics are still skeptical for good reasons in certain areas, but it is happening at this point. I don't think there's any way this is going away.
Yeah, I mean,
there's no way.
Gen Z penny stocks on steroids.
Yeah.
Global 24/7 instant.
Yep. And like everything else, I mean, if you look at it through a micro lens, and I still think we're in a very micro lens in this industry, right? I think you go 25 years from now and you'll be like, oh yeah, this all made sense.
Well, the issue isn't that, it's the meme coin market or that kind of speculative is still 80% of the market.
Yeah.
That's basically the issue.
For now.
And exactly. And when that's inverted in 2.5 years, 24, whatever the timeline is, you're going to just be like, oh, that's, people still go to the casino.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's never going away. It's a new thing. But I do think at some point, just like a stock market, fundamentals will start mattering at some point. And I think some of these companies that aren't really building fundamental businesses behind it, are going to run out of money someday, right? Again, they might have many years left, which will create noise for a while, but I do think fundamentals will matter. Gaming creates fundamentals, which is really interesting. Like you mentioned before, I mean, we're already up there in terms of volume, but what I think is really fascinating is we have a pretty sustainable tokenomics model too, where, basically players are buying tokens either behind the scenes or directly in these games to get assets they want. They're not really selling those tokens or cashing them out very often. So they're just building up more and more stored value in this ecosystem. They're using that stored value to generate more transaction volume, and the transaction volume's burning tokens from gas fees. So you end up having a truly deflationary token supply against a growing player base, right? So it's really, really fascinating. Like I think honestly, the Mythos chain, including we're rolling out staking in the next few weeks. And we have kind of this new burn mechanism that we've kind of now figured out now that we have like real volume. It will be deflationary and sustainable within 12 months, I think. So especially with FIFA and PUBG. So that's the things I think will start shifting in the crypto industry in terms of like really thinking through, not just like TGE and 10X Wind Moon and stuff like that. We're going to really start thinking about, damn, these economics actually can work and build something long-term sustainable. That if now I'm looking out 7-8 years, there's only one way it goes. Bitcoin, I think, has proven that out right now. Frankly, what Michael Saylor and those guys do as it's just amazing. Like they're figuring it out of how to make something sustainable like that, right? Which is interesting.
Yeah. So, well, I think that's what we've got time for.
Okay.
Thanks everyone for listening, watching, wherever you consume this. John, where can people find out more about you?
It seems like I'm in a different city every day. So hopefully I run into a city near you. Honestly, online, at John Was Taken, is my Twitter handle or X handle, sorry, because John Was Taken. And, honestly, I'm pretty accessible on LinkedIn and X and all those different things. So, happy to have anybody reach out that's interested.
Amazing. And you can find us at sportingcrypto.com or newsletter.sportingcrypto.com if you want to sign up to the newsletter. You can find me at Pep Barisha on X and LinkedIn. Please do subscribe, like, and share with your colleagues and friends. And just remember that none of what we have said during the show is financial or business advice, and this content is for informational purposes only. Web3 is underpinned by crypto, and crypto is volatile, meaning you can lose money if you're buying these assets personally or as a business. Where we're recording right now, the majority of crypto asset companies are unregulated. Thanks very much for watching or listening, and we'll have more Sporting Crypto content for you soon.